Welcome to Unit 2.3 on investigation. While some agencies focus on rulemaking and adjudication, others are really focused on bringing enforcement actions in federal court. Although the agencies that do rulemaking and enforcement may also need to do investigation and enforcement. There are several types of investigative powers. These include compelling the production of information and witnesses, compelling the collection of records, and conducting inspections of premises. These were subject to judicial review, which means a court will review if these investigative actions are actually within the agency's statutory and constitutional powers. So we'll talk first about the subpoena power. That means that agencies can be authorized to compel the production of documents or to compel the testimony of a witness. So for example, the FTC can order the production of documentary evidence and testimony of witnesses in order to determine if someone has violated the FTC Act, which prohibits unfair and deceptive practices. A second power is the power to order periodic or special reports. So OSHA, for example, is authorized to require employers to report the death of a worker to the agency, and this would alert the agency to determine if that employer is violating any OSHA regulations. This is different than the subpoena power because the agency is ordering the entity to compile information that otherwise would not exist, whereas the subpoena power is limited to recovering existing documents. In terms of inspecting premises, that can also help determine if the entity or company is complying with regulations or statute. So for example, as you may all be aware, OSHA inspects workplaces. And if the employer refuses to admit the inspector, OSHA can actually compel the employer to do so. The FDA conducts inspections to ensure that a regulated entity is using color additives only for approved purposes. That would be another example of inspection. So here's an example just to think about investigative powers. When you think about regulation and the investigation of cosmetics, there's been some recent attention to this issue as to whether the FDA actually needs to do more regulation and investigation to combat the risks of cosmetics. Right now, the FDA relies on cosmetics manufacturers to voluntarily report issues and adverse events with products, which means that cosmetics manufacturers are not actually held to the same standards that the FDA uses for food and drug facility inspections. So the FDA currently can't inspect a cosmetics company's records for potential safety issues. And this disproportionately affects women's health. That concludes this unit on investigations. And next we're going to turn to some forms of less formal agency guidance.